Okay, let's talk about Procreate and digital reference manipulation. I'll go over workflow stuff and then maybe I'll swap to just the iPad display, but I wanted to show um, the physical iPad because a lot of gestures are important for efficiency, so we'll get into that. But other than Procreate, I really only use Google Photos. It's sort of the two main apps that I use, and that's pretty much it. Not a lot of custom brushes or anything, so it doesn't have to be super complicated. So let's get into it. Like my gallery here, you just see a bunch of images that I've prepped for different kinds of paintings. Some of them have a lot of variation, a lot of iteration. Like this is a painting I just finished. Different, like just swapping like little color values or right or left orientation, that kind of thing. But really, this is like all of my paintings I plan here. I find it just easier than Photoshop. Personally, it's just a lot faster, although Photoshop has more options. So I do use it occasionally. I mean, I have it. This is just more convenient for painting specifically. But yeah, so uh, for setup for Procreate, these blank canvases at the top, they're kind of like standard aspect ratios, which I'll get into. So this is square, 3 by 4, 2 by 3, 1 by 2, 16 by 9, that kind of thing, which is just handy for speed. So I have those set up. You can do that here. Like when you hit new canvas, you can set up, you click this new button, and then you can name them and set them to specific ratios. I don't go super big in terms of pixels. I don't really feel like I need to. It's not like I'm exporting these for print or anything. And actually working low res tends to simplify the images. They kind of like pixelate down and that kind of stuff. And it's fine, honestly. I don't need a lot of detail, which is kind of the point of all this. So where do I start? I'm just going to create a new, so just at the screen size, right? So you just create a new document. Like Photoshop and that kind of stuff, there are layers. So you can create multiple layers. This will be really, really important for compositing reference, which we'll get into. But you've got layers, you've got layer modes. So we'll talk about that. Where it's how the layers are, like some of them are transparent, how they affect the underlayers, and it's really useful for manipulating lighting and that kind of stuff, which we'll talk about. But where I want to start is just some basic workflow. So, like I mentioned, Google Photos. So if I'm working on a new idea or something like that, what I'll typically do is and by the way, I'll try to stop, and if you're not familiar with like iPad gestures, you can drag up, switch apps. That's what I'm doing here, right? So this is like a set of photos that I took. Now I used an iPhone, and when I shoot on my iPhone, it's uploading pretty high res photos to Google Photos, and then I'm using this to sync down. I don't use the like native photo app much, just because I don't like storing all the the raw files on my devices, just because I have too many. So it's just a nice backup. So whatever, you use Dropbox or whatever. But anyway, so these are like a couple of photos from this scene. And I apologize, I have to like look around my phone while I'm filming here. So what I would typically do, and what I suggest people do, is like don't try to crop all the time when you're outside and taking photos. You want to take a lot of different views, different exposures. You can see like these two images here are different exposures. Like this one's exposing the shadows, this one's exposing the highlights, so that you can get some good variety. It's not like blowing out all your darks like in here. So some photos are going to be more shape reference, and then some of them are going to be lighting and color, and having more than you need is good. and I'll show you why we want more rather than just always shooting a crop of a specific view. So a lot of times what I would do is, I might pull in a couple of photos and start playing with that stuff. So here's the first gesture that I would recommend is if you hit the power button and the volume up button, it takes a screenshot and you can crop it, right? And then you can click this button up here and you can just copy it, drag up back to Procreate. Now that's copied to a clipboard like Control C on a computer or whatever. 3 fingers down, if you drag, there's a paste option here and it'll paste in the screenshot. It should. I don't know why it didn't. Try that again, screenshot, copy, and then drag up, Procreate, 3 fingers, drag down, paste. Okay. Then it lets you like manipulate it and move it around, right? So if I'm kind of exploring an idea, what I might do is like pull a couple of photos. Like here's a few, here's an even wider shot. Maybe like this close up of this rock. So I'll just screenshot these. Now you might ask like, well, why wouldn't you just download all these photos and just have them on your iPad? I don't. This feels faster to me because it's just this is all like temporary stuff, so I don't really feel the need to like download photos. Let's see what else. Which other one? I do take videos too, especially for water. It's kind of nice to get the feel for the rapids and just the movement. So copy, once again, 3 fingers, drag, paste, right? Just get a vibe of that waterfall. Right, so I might just pull these into, and you can see as I paste in, I get oops, multiple, oh, that's why, okay, the layer mode's weird. I get multiple layers. It like pastes everything on a layer, right? So you can turn them on and off, right? You could merge them down, which we'll talk about. So, yeah. The first thing that I would typically do, and it doesn't really matter, the brush that we're using. Just something small. Okay. So we've got our images pasted in. These 2 thumb controls over here. This is your scale, right? Big brush, small brush. 2 finger tap is an undo, right? This is your opacity on this track here. So if you want sort of a lighter, I usually try to work with full opacity. It's just good habit. Don't rely on half colors. It's just a good practice. Try to commit to lines. And then this middle thumb button is a color picker, which we'll use a lot of when we get into kind of deeper manipulation, right? So what I would typically do is, I've got photos here, and I might just start like thumbnailing just really big shapes. Trying to think about like where's the horizon. Maybe if this comes down, there's like this big shadow here. There's a rock here. There's kind of some darks under these rocks. It's kind of like where the natural focal point is. And I don't spend that long on these kinds of thumbnails. What I'm trying to just do is get a feel for the biggest shapes. See, I don't even use opacity when I'm doing these even. I'm trying to look for focal areas and that kind of thing. So when we get into the crop and the screen size, I have a better idea of what kind of works. So here's the waterfall. I'll probably move that out. Like move the waterfall this way because it's kind of hidden behind this wall right here, which is why you take multiple photos. So we'll show how to like bash those together. Right, this is in shadow, and then there's a bunch of junk in here. So like square kind of works, right? Maybe we did a really long one. And I'm not gonna go too deep into like compositing an image, or composing an image rather. I might do a different video on that. This is more on like Procreate, specifically just so you can get a feel for the workflow, right? And there's like water, the shadow's cool, great. Notice like the rocks, all I'm doing is really marking where the shadows are, and then the light forms sort of emerge. Something like that. Big shapes. You want like 5 or 6 shapes, right? Sort of like background waterfall, big rock, light, dark, and then this sort of sidewall thing. Something like that. So vertical is kind of cool. So, you know, I'm just like, it's sort of like a scratch pad, right? You want to, you're sort of redrawing the shapes just to get familiar with them. Like, oh, this rock is cool. I like, it's got this like sort of inverted thing, and you can't see this face, right? That side kind of lines with that. It's kind of got this like double thing. There's like a crack right here. And you're just like, oh, that's cool. And just by drawing it, you kind of like explore its form a bit. And it's like, oh, this is an important thing to include in the painting, or not. Like these are kind of weird. They kind of look like a swimmer or something. But I love this. Oh, another iPad thing. You can pinch zoom, right? Like this is nice. I love all the orange in here. Like I would definitely play with this color in here if I was going. But this is where like I've overexposed the shadows, so you can see like all this junk in here, which is cool. Like you can start to see the shapes. This is weird. I don't like that. It's like an odd thing. Like I could immediately see like, oh, simplify all this, right? But what we're trying to do, or what I try to do here, is just kind of like explore the idea. So if I'm thinking about this, it's like maybe square, right? Maybe I'll do something square, right? That's why I've got all of these set up. So these are like pre-made canvas sizes, and I've got my grid here that I'll talk about. And it just makes it easier to just spin up new ones. So like these ones, for example, like these are, you know, here's a square. This is 3x4, I think, something I'm working on. And some of these don't have a lot of layers. Like the photos are actually pretty good. Well, this one kind of does. But you can see like little color shift tweaks. See how I have like light in the background? I've started to play with those orange highlights of the reflected trees, cutting out the darks, that kind of stuff. See this one especially, like all the shadows. See how I'm warming up all the shadows because the phone cameras strip all that stuff out. So it's not a lot of stuff. I usually have like a black and white layer set to desaturate so I can see the values, especially if you zoom out like this, right? You can kind of get a sense, squint. You can see the big shapes. It's like putting your red filter glasses on. It's just a nice, cheap way of doing that. But we'll get into that. So we're thinking sort of a square, right? So I'll go back to my Google Photos, kind of like which is the one I want to start with. I kind of like the tighter crop, but let's see. I'll probably go with this one. Well, we'll do this one. We'll kind of fix the lights because a lot of this is in shadow. So once again, power button and volume up. recopy it. And I'm just copying, like notice here, you can like save to your photos and stuff. Like by just copying it, it doesn't like increase your storage. And you don't have like all these like half done images like clogging up your stuff. So I'm just gonna duplicate this, right? So then I've got a new square, and you'll notice everything I do is untitled because why title them? It doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm just gonna paste this in. Now, grid. You'll notice like my images, and people ask about this all the time. This is like a harmonic armature. So, I mean, it's basically thirds, which is the pink lines. And then in addition to the pink lines, you get these diagonals which intersect the midpoint of the opposing edge, right? So midpoint, midpoint, and corner. And so there's 3 in the corners and 4 on the edges, right? And by doing that, you can geometrically, if you only, like basically if you had a piece of paper and you folded it in half on each side, you would have the midpoints, you could draw lines, and you could find your thirds without a ruler. I mean, it's kind of like the geometric proof version of this. But what it does is it identifies your thirds, just like your viewfinder in your camera, but it adds all these horizontal or these diagonal lines with interesting intersections that are more oblique. Like they can create different sort of tension in different ways rather than just the thirds. And you can ride the lines is kind of what I tend to describe it as, but you don't have to. So it just gives you a little bit of a framework to say, well, I don't really have a better idea of like where this line should go. Maybe I should snap it to this line and it will look a little bit better, right? So that's kind of the gist there. So I pasted this in. Now, one big thing to do is like, well, I've already made some pretty big decisions, like just with the composition, like a square, right? Like I can only do so much in a square. So now you can see my grid lines. Like I start thinking about like where's the emphasis, and you really only want one, and thinking about the story of the painting, like what it's about. So my storytelling digital course like goes into all this stuff about like scale and relative focal points and distance and all that kind of stuff. But for now, it's like, well, what do you care about? Do you care about the waterfall? Do you care about this rock? Do you care about this rock? Like, you really want to emphasize it. Doesn't mean it can't be there, but it's where you put your time, your energy, your calories, your detail is really what you're trying to decide so that it can give your composition emphasis. So I do like this rock. It kind of like drives to this point here. So, maybe we just leave it there for now. You get a little bit of the water, but not too much, right? But I could go this way, right? Just ignore the waterfall entirely. Maybe even this entirely. And now it becomes like, see how like I'm riding this line with this rock, and it's intersecting this line too. Here and here. Even get some interaction in here. So I'm not trying to be like a slave to all of this stuff, but it's kind of like, hey, that's a nice like oomph. It's got an emphasis up into the corner here. Horizon's nice and high. That's pretty cool too. So a lot of times it's like this is sort of one starting point. You could go low, right? Like now it's about the river, although this looks kind of weird. So then it's like, oh, I'm gonna blow out this rock and it's about the waterfall behind, or no waterfall. Ooh, that's kind of nice. Like we ride this line down to this intersection here, right? Like our eyes drive right to that point. But you can start to see like this also starts to pull focus too, because it's a super bright against a super dark. So then it's like, oh, it's actually not about this, it's about this. And now like your emphasis totally changes, like while you are just moving this around. Or maybe you do this and you're like, whoa, okay, now like, we read right to left here. So there's some cinematic language. It's like, someone's looking to if you see someone looking to your right in a film, that's like future versus past. Like there's some of that kind of stuff. And sometimes it just feels different when you flop it. You have a right-handed bias maybe, or left-handed bias, whatever hand you write with. So you tend to favor one side. So it's good to explore. But I'm just using these options down here, like flipping horizontal. But we'll keep it the same. Again, we're not talking about composition. So we'll just try to make this image as best as we can here. Yeah, that's fine, right? Okay, so let's say like first, in addition to this, like we want to kind of get a better sense of the lights as well. So I'm just gonna copy this here. And this is, again, I'm just showing you sort of like how I would attack things. 3 fingers to drag down. I paste this. Now what I'm doing is I'm gonna hit this N, which is the layer mode right now. I'm gonna just lower the opacity. That's the transparency, right? I'm just gonna scale this up so it roughly matches what's underneath there. Which is pretty big. Roughly, okay. And then I'm gonna start erasing. Right, because what I basically did was I only want the lights. Right, so that was exposed by the shadows. Now you can have like more natural lights. They're not all blown out. It's kind of a combination of the two. So when people say like double expose your photos, this is why. Right, now I have like shadows and they're close enough. Right, it's like, yeah, it's a little wonky, but whatever. Right, so I can do that. I could even start to manipulate these if I wanted to, but we're gonna keep it kind of simple here. Okay, so like this waterfall, it's kind of weird. I don't like those teeth. Like, it's kind of odd. Like, nature is awesome, but it's not always the best organized. So I'm gonna take this to our sensibility, right? It's like, if something looks awkward, it's like, well, it's going to draw a lot of attention because someone is going to try to figure out why the hell that thing is that way, because it looks intentional, right? Like, why are all these teeth here? Is it man-made? Is that a wall? Was it a dam? It just creates more questions than answers, which is, if it's not the focal point of a painting, you got to be careful, right? So I might just paste this in. I might just erase some of this junk around it. And now pressure is a thing, right? Like if I go lighter on this, it's not quite as severe on the opacity. And I don't have to try that hard. It kind of like blends itself down into all this stuff. See? It's not perfect. It's like, but sometimes you can't even tell like all the weird edges that you missed. And it kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of close enough, and especially for this like low res type work. See, it kind of blends into this rock edge, but if it didn't, like, who cares? I mean, that light is kind of nice, right? But it's like, now it's like I'm dialing down all that contrast as a bonus. I don't need all that junk back there. It's not about that, and yeah, kind of reads better than this weird toothy pinch over here. So that'd be like one thing that I would change. Okay, so that gives you a little sense of like just layers and reordering and turning on and off. Now, like when I get into, I'll just go to an example. I'll go to like let's see, what's this one? That doesn't have too many. Some of these will have like tons and tons of layers. Like this has got tons of like color adjustments and little, like one pass is for color, one pass is for shape, one pass is for shadows, one part is for lights, just to kind of get this to read ever increasingly better. It's less destructive that way too, meaning like when you do it that way, you can turn it on and off and kind of go backwards versus like a real digital painting where you're like committing to a layer and then you have no choice but just repainting it. So it's less destructive for this when you're using layers. Okay, so a couple of just basic adjustment things. here's one that I could use quite often. So this circle up here is your color picker. I like the circle, the disc. It makes sense to me. Your complements are across, right? You go neutralized to a gray, and then you're basically jumping over here, and then you can go, right? So it's kind of basic stuff. Now, when a lot of times I'm just using like the basic brushes, like it's nothing complicated. It doesn't really matter, honestly, for most of the stuff that I'm doing. But you know, I'm just gonna put this cool gray back here, and I'll show you why. When I put that down, I can lower the opacity, right? But I can also change the layer modes here. So I can darken, which will take it and darken the layer underneath. Multiply is very similar, where it's like it's trying to smash the layers together. I don't know all the technical, like how these like work technically. I know screen kind of blows everything out and makes it lighter, right? So this is kind of cool. Kind of makes it sort of like foam and mist back there. That's a screen. Versus a color dodge is like a, it's like trying to really saturate the colors, I've noticed. Adding kind of adds to the shadows, that kind of thing. You can lighten color. Overlaying is sort of an intensity color thing. Honestly, I think it's just trying different things, and seeing what they do, honestly, and just getting a feel for them. That's kind of cool. So the soft light's kind of nice. It's just cooling it down a little bit, but I don't want all of this cool because it's kind of like in sunlight, but just like in that watery grotto area, just cool it down. See the difference on the temperature? Just cooling it down just a little bit. I can bring that up too. Now that's not changing the values very much, right? It's cooling the temperature, but it's not changing the values. So I might swipe this left and then duplicate it, and then I might screen it, or I might lighten color. Maybe I'll screen it, and then erase some of that down. And that gives me that like foamy spray back there. Because what I would want to do is like contrast the cool with this like warm wall over here, and that kind of thing. So layer modes, again, click on this letter and you can play with those and just see what happens when you start to adjust those things. You know, even broader, like let's say you wanted like a really blown out kind of like hot deserty look, right? So I've just created a new layer. I'm covering the whole thing. It's like, you know, color dodge or a screen with a warm, dialing it down. Now it has that like hot, dusty, canyon vibe, right? Let's say I wanted to even keep that cool back there. Like maybe I erase some of this. And now I have like even a hotter feel, right? Something like that. So you can play with different colors, right? Like maybe a pink. It kind of gives me a Polaroid feel with that magenta shadow thing. Maybe, what does that green look like? It's kind of cool. It's kind of neat. But those are some of the things I would play with, right? So like this example, like you can see this magenta overlay, like really tints the whole thing. And here I've also, I've actually cut the rocks. You can see on my layer here, I've cut the rocks out of the sky so that I can manipulate the sky separately as a layer underneath. So I could like, you know, change the feel of the sky without changing the rocks. So you can kind of make like a paper cutout set is like one way to think about it, so that you can change layers and stuff. So that's what that layer modes would look like, right? So a lot of this is like cutting and pasting like we should, layers, and then adjusting layers. So one more example. Let me just see if I can find something here. Like let's say I had a rock or something that I really liked. Like because we cut this out, like maybe I really like this. Like sometimes I'm cropping in like very specific elements. Like, ooh, I really like this rapid. And this could be like from a totally different location too, which I've done a lot of. Right? Maybe I want this down in here. Kind of a harder edge. You know, I just want this little rapid right here. So I'll just erase everything, see if it kind of can get it to fit in right in here, something like that. So I can make this little pocket, right? It's like once you forget how you pasted it in and where you erased, they blend in pretty easily without having to do a whole lot. And you can kind of get all these like neat little pockets and patches from different images that show you, you know, just gives you extra little details and stuff. And I could scale this up. It's like, oh, maybe it's like in the foreground, right? Oh, maybe it's a cliff. Oh, that's kind of cool. Here's another sorry for I'm just all over the place, but as things come to me, there's a couple other options here. Like we can adjust the hue. So maybe I want to darken this. Maybe I'm going to throw it in the shadow as if this is all cast in shadow. I'm going to cool it off and tilt it a little blue, right? And I might actually paint this, right? It's a blue sky, so I know if you've watched any of my atmosphere, the second light source on a sunny day like this is going to be blue sky. So it's going to be kind of a bluish gray coming down here, maybe some orange bounce light from something else, but right, if I did this and I multiply this down, it's a little much. Let's just cool it off a little bit. That gives it that like, hey, it's in shadow, but it's being lit by the canopy light. So it's going to take on a cooler quality, but maybe over here we actually warm it up because it's getting bounce light from here. This is a very crude example, but you can kind of see the idea of chopping things from one to the other and then pasting it in. I mean, now I get this like interesting pinch here versus like, oh, it's like a totally different feel when you throw something in the foreground like that, right? This feels more open and inviting. This feels a little bit more secretive to me. So different things you can do. Now, what else? So when you start manipulating multiple things, you might be wondering like, well, how do I put this overlay on it? How do I move these things together? You can swipe right, right? And it'll select multiple layers and you can move them around together. So you could move the whole thing if you wanted. You could start shifting everything around together. 2 fingers to undo, and you get that. So you could group them, right? And you could like name your groups if you're super organized. I never do, but you get the idea. Now let's do one more. This is a really important one to do, specifically with stuff like this, where photos just tend to do no justice to shadows. It's kind of a travesty, actually. Maybe a red, but they always like kill all the nice warm, typically warm, not always, but a lot of times. I'm just choosing random warms kind of from the scene here, like oranges, and because like this rock is probably the same material as this rock, right? I'm just sort of scrubbing this in very crudely as an illustration. Now I switch this to add. Like that's going to add those colors to those shadows. Now notice the difference. It feels lighter. It feels more alive. It doesn't feel dead. Maybe purpley down in here. See how that feels. And now wherever I'm adding this color, it's only adding it in dark areas. That's like how the add thing sort of works, or it's more noticeable with dark shapes, right? So you could really warm things up and play with a lot of color without like direct painting. See how it kind of brightens all of this stuff up if I really want to push that orange. But then maybe I want to equally push some blue in here. A little richer. Right, really cool things off in here. So there's a little bit of exaggeration, but the add component is a critical one to sort of bring life back to your shadows pretty easily. And notice like I didn't really paint that detailed either, because it's like it's going to clip to the shadows anyway, so you can be really messy and not have to care about that stuff. Okay, we'll start painting a little bit, but before I do that, I just want to show you one more thing. If you add a layer of black, typically all of my paintings will have this, and you scroll all the way down to like saturation. This is where you can start to read your values. Basically just strips all the color out, right? And so I like to squint small and start to see like where the darks, where the lights, are there weird tangents? Like up here is sort of a weird V tangent, so I might dial that back. This is really dark. It's in shadow, but I might not want it that dark. This is kind of weird. This tree, this gap, like when I squint, there's kind of this like zigzag shape down, which is maybe not bad. It kind of leads us in here, but that's a little weird, that 1, 2, 3. So it just kind of strips all the color out. And then when you turn it back on, it's like, whoa, okay, wow, I'm way brighter than I thought I was, which is kind of a common thing. I'm going to turn the grid off just to see. Okay, so that saturation layer is really nice. You can also, on the canvas here, if you go to canvas, you can flip horizontal. So this helps with your right-handed bias or left-handed bias, right? You can just kind of give it a squint. Am I like feeling kind of lopsided, which tends to happen, especially with figures. So it's just another double check to see things fresh, which is great. Like I'll do that all the time when, like this is a painting that I recently was working on. And a lot of times I will, as I get closer to a painting or I'm working on something like physical and I get stuck, I'll take a photo, and like this is what it was before, and I wasn't liking all this in here. So you can see like I added new rocks, like cutting details and noise, like smudging out layers, reading it small, and just seeing the differences. So if you ever get stuck like on a physical painting, like it's another good way to just take a photo, throw it in here, and you can experiment and try some solutions to problems before you commit to it in paint, which is a handy thing. Okay, just a little bit on painting, and let me check the time. Okay, yeah, a little bit on painting. Again, not a digital painting, but this is what I would typically do. So I have a new layer. I typically like to paint in new layers, and then I'm usually putting my thumb here because I'm going to be color picking a lot from what's here. So every time I hold this down with my thumb, I can choose a color, right? Now, let's say I want to paint out this tree because it doesn't make sense. I'm going to select the shadow color right next to it. Oops. Let's go down in opacity. Sorry, down in scale. Yeah, a little up. And all I'm going to do is selecting colors near what I'm trying to paint out to kind of give it I'm kind of extending what's there to cover up what is underneath. Now it's not really painting in the sense of There's a log there. I thought that was a that's weird. I thought that was an errant stroke, but it's not. It's a log in that waterfall, which we will remove. So I'm just, again, sourcing the color, making a mark, sourcing the color, making a mark, sourcing, making a mark, right? This is equivalent to, if you ever watch, there's a YouTube channel called Baumgartner Restoration, or any like oil painting restoration. And when they do retouching, what they're trying to do is like mask the error without repainting it to match. And so this is very, very similar. Like a couple of marks roughly in the same ballpark are enough to close up the shape or cover or whatever without doing too much damage, right? So a lot of little marks. You don't need tree brushes and all that junk and leaf brushes. Like, who cares? What you need is like a shape, and you need to have a clear idea of like, okay, like these two trees are equal sizes. That's weird. It's gonna stand out, so I'm gonna paint out one. But I like that cool green in the background, right? I don't like all these light bits. They're distracting. I don't like these verticals here. I'm just grabbing colors that are back there. This dark is too dark. I don't need any of these. Right? Now, when I zoom out, you can't tell. You can't tell any of that stuff has been done, but when you zoom in, it looks gnarly. But who cares? What you're trying to do is just get a clearer shape read and say, oh, I like these trees. I'll connect these. I'm kind of liking that. They give a nice glow on top of this rock. Oops. They give a nice glow on top of this rock. It gets a little muddy in here, so I'm gonna like, it's like maybe not, maybe bigger strokes. Cooler. Right? Maybe a little bit of this cool down here. So this is not at all how I would recommend painting at all, right? But I'm not trying to like simulate oil painting or whatever digitally, which a lot of people try to do, which is fine, like with brushes and whatever, you're trying to give it that look. All I care about is like, I'm gonna literally take this iPad and put it over there and look at it while I'm painting and like manage the strokes that way. And so what I need is like a reference, a 3x3 scale reference with the right colors and the right values, and that's what I'm looking at. I might get into edges digitally, so I don't forget things like, oh, I really want to emphasize this edge, or I really want to let this edge go. You know, so hey, don't forget to do this. I might actually smudge this out here, or even on the image itself. Like, use the smudge tool. I really want to let all this go. That's more of a reminder for me while I'm painting real life to, and this is just the smudge tool up here, which uses brushes just like anything else, right? So you can do that as well. Like, there's a difference between trying to make the reference as realistic and still representative as possible, and then you are interpreting live on your painting, or you're trying to keep pushing it to go to try to simulate the strokes and the effects that you are planning on doing and seeing if they work. So it's kind of two different things. But in terms of noise and focus, noise meaning too many bits, too many detail, too many sparkles, taking up too much attention. I don't like all this hard edge on this tree, so I'm trying to like, maybe I can just soften and blend this right into this rock a little bit more gradually, so there's not that hard line there, and that kind of reads as one value across, right? And then I might start taking more of a harder approach, right? Now I'm designing this shape. pinching this light. Yeah, I still want to bring it down, but I don't want it to be quite so large. Add some warmth along the mid-tone edge as that rolls over. Right, and you could zoom in and do all this stuff, but I don't need to. Like, this is what I need from sort of like a clearer read. So that's kind of like what I would try to do on the painting side. Like maybe on this, like, yeah, on like just trying to knock out weird things. Like in here, like simplifying this whole area, like all this foam and water and stuff. Where am I? Oops. Opacity is at 0. It's like, I don't want all these rocks. Maybe none of this. So it gives you a really powerful like simplification tool to, I want to cut out that little sparkle back there too. I don't want this to feel like there's a bunch of light back there. I want that to be kind of brooding and mysterious back in there. Something like that, right? Then you can start to say, like, move through each, and like, this is weird. I don't like that. That's distracting. That's distracting. I don't know what this is. Just put that up back there. So I'm looking for like weird tangents and shapes. Maybe I want to connect shapes. I'm always wary of like super bright brights that are on like wrapped around a dark like that. Like it's like your eyes are drawn right to stuff like that. So, you know, maybe I can connect these. Maybe I actually connect them like that. Maybe a little too much. But this is the kind of stuff that I would squint and think about and then undo, redo, just to get the right feeling and combination. Like now I can see like these two shapes are like mirrors of each other, which are weird, which I couldn't see before. So sometimes you'll actually create more problems and then you gotta like solve those problems as you simplify. I like those cracks though, but those are kind of similar too. So like errant symmetry, accidental symmetry, repeating elements, like you gotta be wary of all that, because the more you start to make decisions in here, the more you'll tend to repeat things like strokes and stuff. So you just need to, you know, be aware of that. Just like painting in general. I don't like that tangent pointing right there here too. No, nothing where it's a corner meeting right at the edge of the canvas is no good. It's distracting. This could be cool or distracting. I don't know. Really emphasizing that. Oops. Maybe. Ripples and stuff. I would definitely knock back a lot of this stuff and try to simplify it to just get the shadows to read, right? I really want the darks and the lights to read well against each other. So I might like exaggerate the darks, in the shadow, so that those, it's a lot clearer because the foam can really screw that up, that kind of thing. So I think that's kind of the overview of what I would do. Now, sometimes what I would do as I go to paint a finished painting is like I might have my reference, and these are all random thumb marks as I'm zooming in while I'm painting with gloves on. But I'll have my like highly stylized, so you can see all my marks here and color adjustments and all that stuff. But I might throw in the original, right? So I can see like, okay, sparkles, I can see how the water is actually flowing so that I can maybe blend the two if I'm getting a little lost. Or, oh, there's these shadows in the original that I lost in my manipulated reference. So I might just pull like actual stuff, like, oh, these plants grow up. They don't all grow down, so I can vary those shapes. So it's kind of like as I'm oil painting, I've got this iPad, I'm looking at this, and I can zoom into this and be like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. But I can go back to stay on track with the vision. But if I need a little dose of reality, I might like, oh, this crack is cool. I ended up removing it because it was distracting. But yeah, that's one thing. Last, I might just show you just one example. So what's cool about Procreate is that it records all these time lapses. So this is what happens when you create new files from other files. But I had a photo. I had like a mood photo that I was going for. And then here's an oil study that I did. So I'm like looking at the study that I did from my reference without editing a whole lot. Then kind of like a mood, just a different photo that I was trying to do. So you can see all of my kind of iterations. And a lot of this was like figures, like what's the story here? Like, is there someone resting here? You can see all of like me trying to like figure out like the steps and how to get this like atmosphere. You could see me turning the grid on and off. Oh, that's like a different idea. So I'm chopping in photos from pexels.com, Pexels.com, which is like a royalty-free site. So I use that sometimes for model reference and trying to explore figures in the landscape. And then this is really kind of stitching them in, adjusting colors. This is a little bit tougher to like get their skin tones to match. Like, are they in the light or in the shadows? Like, how does that read? And it's just back and forth. This is over like multiple weeks, working on this for 15 minutes, letting it sit, come back, playing with it again. Different color temps. You can see those shifting, cooler, warmer. Like adding haze, adding shadows, warming, like adding warmth to the shadows here, deepening all in this. So we're like halfway through this. Deeper shadows still, glow, a much cooler vibe, starting over. Like that does happen sometimes where you might just get so chop happy that it's like I've totally lost the plot here. So this is me starting over. It's like there's something here. There's an idea here. She's too big. I like the pose. Maybe close up. Maybe peeking around the corner. Like this is more story stuff. Like what is the better vibe here? Someone who's just discovered this. Someone who's passing by and totally missed it. Is the person in it? Are they the focal point, or are they kind of hidden in the shadows here? Which is kind of a cool vibe. The warm colors on his shirt kind of match. Lets him blend in. Just more and more and more adjustments. Almost there. This is a long one. I eventually didn't like him. Those white lines that you saw popping in was just like reaffirming the big shapes. And then thinking about figures again. It's like starting over. What's better? Right, so then I'm carving out. I think this one is the actual one that I ended up. Still haven't painted this, but I think the idea feels better. See how the harmonic grid, her shoulders like hit that line right in particular. So yeah, I think that one's it. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a sense. Maybe I'll show you one more. I think this one was pretty intense. One lesson that maybe you could take away from this is like plan way more paintings than you ever can do. Always better to have way more details. So hang on, let me fast forward because this is all. When you copy it, just because I need the size, it actually records all the time lapses. Okay, so here's this one where it starts. Okay, so I had this. Okay, so I cut out the background, right? I liked this foreground, and it had the sun hitting the background behind this. So I erase this. I throw layers behind it. Then I can adjust the colors of the foreground and the background independently. And it's really about the silhouette, right? So I can carve out the trees and then work on the sky separately without worrying about those two edges interacting, because it's a real pain in the butt. I'm adjusting like the depth of the sky. Does it feel better if there's more sky? Excuse me, does it feel better if there's less sky? Now I'm bringing reflections down as focal points. Same thing. Maybe there's a figure here, traversing these logs precariously in the shadows, which I think is cool. Like these are like painting, like the titles. Like sometimes it's like I get ideas for titles, or I'll come back and like make notes to myself for the next week, like, oh, this doesn't work, this is too dark, whatever. Adding more logs. It's like, oh, this negative shape is too big. Add more junk. Nope, add less junk. Write these lines instead. So it's a lot of like problem solving, of like trying to fix this problem. It causes a different problem. Trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I resolve that problem? And then get to something that's something that you like. I didn't end up liking this. This one's still in progress. I still can't quite crack this one. I think this is where I left it. I don't know where this one started. Okay, sometimes the time lapses take a little bit to load. Other manipulations. Okay, yeah. So here's just another version of this that's a lot tighter and more claustrophobic in the foreground, I think. So, like, how far can you push that alpenglow afternoon light against those trees? Is it the right tone? I'm just agonized over that. Find an example image, trying to match the colors. Oh, I like that lavender sky. Pull that in, stitch it in. Does it feel right? It still feels too saturated. Yeah, again, I still haven't cracked this one. It just feels artificial, and the values don't feel quite right. But like, this is the work, right? Painting the actual thing is one thing, but like making sure that your idea is as strong as possible is what this is all about, because it is a heck of a lot faster and cheaper, both in time and energy and calories and materials, to figure an idea out here and say, yeah, maybe, but then put it aside, and then knock out 10 more, and then 10 more after that, and then 10 more after that, and then 10 more after that. And then when you finish a piece and say, oh, what's my next piece? Maybe this. You can really start to see these fresh and start to think about what's worth your time to scale up. This is, again, I copied an old one. I'm going to stop doing this because I can't share these very easily. Okay, here's the one that I want to share. Right, so from here, you can see, oh, I'm totally changing the lighting of this. It was like a bright, sunny day, and instead I'm going to do this like moody, cloudy, kind of eerie thing. playing with water highlights, thinking about like how the light would shift the tones of the rocks, using adjustment layers to, in this case, overcast light kills all the shadows. So if we go back here, you can see these like deeper shadows because it was a bright sunny day. Well, I actually have to neutralize a lot of those because in even overcast light, you won't get those shadows. So once you know more about light and how it interacts, you're able to manipulate things and then keep it in like a realistic ballpark with a few little tweaks. But you can definitely exaggerate where needed. Trying to think of another one to exaggerate, but we'll call it there. Oh, like this one. This one's like super exaggerated. I don't even remember what the... So let me fast forward here. You can see very similar ones because I keep copying the same ones and then starting over. Okay, yeah. So here's the last one and we'll leave it there. Right? Bright sunny day in the mountains. It's like, I don't want anything close to that. So this is more composition, right? Kind of like the lighting. I like this edge. Maybe I need something in the foreground. Nope. More, less. And now start like cooling this off. Maybe to add a little bit more atmosphere. Oh, maybe sunlight. Nope. Now I want this like cool, eerie thing that's gonna start kicking in here. Right? So this is like a heavy adjustment. Pasting in rocks, details to give it variety. But trying to like match all that. Here's my figure. Didn't like him. It's a lot of trial and error. Like trying to shape all those ridges in the mountains. Much better. I love hoods. Hoods give you a nice like a shape on the top to reflect light, which I like. Yeah, so like totally different vibe, right, from the original sunny day photo, with heavy manipulation to kind of lean into a mood. But like once that's locked in, then it's like, oh, all you have to do is paint it. So hopefully that is helpful. If you have questions or if you want to see more like this, let me know in the comments. I do check the link down below as well. I've got digital classes for composition and all that kind of stuff if you're interested. But I hope that was helpful. Thanks.